Okay, so check this out. I'm gonna come up here, and there we go. The player actually moves into a different area. In this video, we're gonna cover this. We're gonna make it so that when the player collides with this little arrow, it moves to a whole different area. We're also going to code triggers as a result of that. Basically, a trigger is when the player runs over something, some code happens. This is how you do scripted events. Anyway, let's get started. Just a word to know before we start, there are new images that I made for the sake of this video. And so if you download the source code, you'll get those images as well if you want to use them. The link is in the description below for the source code. Now let's go to components, and then we'll go to physics. And we currently have the body class. We have to ask ourselves, okay, what do triggers and bodies have in common? A body is kind of like a solid object. The trigger calls some code. So we need a common class between those. Let's create a class called physical object. Physical object is also going to have a hitbox, but it's not going to append to the body. So we can just get rid of this part. Next, we're going to bring over the this is colliding with function. Just go ahead and cut it. And then we're just going to do it over here. The next thing we're going to do is the body class is now going to inherit from the physical object. And instead of doing this part right here where we create the hitbox, let's call this superclass. And now the body is a physical object, and it'll just set up the hitbox as normal. Next thing we're going to do is we're also going to keep track of the trigger, all of the triggers in the game. And then what we'll do is we'll actually use our trigger class here. So we'll come in here and we'll do a trigger. And then a trigger is also a physical object. So it is colliding with all that. So it does the same thing, but it adds to triggers. And what it does is it takes a parameter called on. And this is the function that you want it to call whenever the trigger gets stepped on. We're not going to get too complicated with this. Let's just go to player. And then inside of the player, we're going to import that, let's see here, component. Oh, right here, we can just come in here and say also all of the triggers as well. So we'll also import the triggers. At the very end of this, we're going to come in here and just loop through each one of them, for triggers. If we're colliding with the trigger, then we're just going to call the function, whatever function the trigger has. So now that we've got the trigger set up, let's go to components, and we'll make a new file called teleporter.py. The teleporter, when the player steps on it, it loads a new area. In our teleporter class, we're going to have a single function called teleport. It's going to take in an area file that it's going to want to do. And we're going to load the area, and we're just going to say, hey, load file. So whenever we call this function, it'll load another area. Our actual teleporter class itself, our component, is going to look something like this. It's going to take in an X and Y and all that kind of stuff for the actual trigger class itself. But it's going to take in an area file. And we pass in a lambda, again, just like a function that we want it to call. So it's going to just call this teleport function, passing in the area file whenever the player steps on it. In the last video, we created a bunch of factories that create different entities in our game. So let's jump to that. Let's go to data and objects. And so yeah, we've got one that makes a player, makes a tree, makes a rock. Let's go ahead and create one that makes a teleporter. Now we have our teleporter factory. So it'll create a teleporter. The args3 part I'm going to show you here in a second. And then it just does a sprite with this new teleporter up. I think it's like an arrow image. And then we'll come in and we'll import this and go into your start.map file. And let's actually put a teleporter here. So we'll say it's an ID of 3. We'll put it at 0 and 0. And then this is where the args3 part comes in. We're going to come in here and say the name of a map file, somewhere.map. I have a file here. Just make it the same. Create. If you don't have one, create another one, and just put this inside of here. Basically, you're saying, hey, teleport to this area. let's go and actually test it. So we'll go to main.py and we'll run it. And if everything works, we've got this. Let's go ahead and run into it and we'll see what happens. And there we go. And we have that. Now, here's a little problem. Take a look. We now have 2 players. The problem that's happening is we loaded all the new tiles and all that, stuff, but we never cleared out the existing sprites. And this is actually one of the things that you need to be aware of if you use the singleton pattern in programming, is that if you don't properly clean it up or clear it out, you can have stuff like this happen. So let's do that real quick. Our area class is going to be responsible for that. So let's jump into the area class and go ahead and add the following method to it. We're going to create a method called reset everything. And it's just going to reset each one of these global lists that we're keeping track of things like our sprites and active objects. And then also I added this here, call that function here as well in front of your load file. Let's go ahead now and we'll test it. So we'll come into main.py, run this, and let's run into our teleporter, and there we go. And we have that. Let's get rid of the water real quick. I'll go ahead and do that real quick. Let's see here. So I basically just changed all these to zeros. I added a little bit more. Let's create a teleporter back. So we'll say 3, 7, and 7, and then we'll do start.map. Perfect. We'll go back to the map file. I'm going to come into main.py. We'll test it. And there we go. And there we go. Now you might notice the player's always coming back at the same spot. And maybe we want the player to go kind of near the teleporter itself, come back. Let's do one more thing. We're going to modify the teleporter to optionally pick the player's location as to where they're going to go. Let's come in here to the teleporter class, and we're going to take in a couple more arguments when we create it. We're going to optionally take in a player X, set that to none, and we'll take in a player Y and set that to none. Reason we're using none and not like 0 or something for this is because we want to check it, and if it's none, we'll just ignore it. We'll just default to where the player goes. The teleport function is also going to get that. So we added those there to the teleport function. Add those 2 down here as well. Go ahead and also add an if statement here. This if statement is going to check if the player, if we actually have something there, and then we'll set it. Now, we don't have an elegant way of actually getting the player. So I think the area class needs another method that we can look up just anything that we need. So let's go to area.py. We're going to add another method to area.py called search for first. So it'll get the first entity that has a specific kind on it. And we'll jump back to the teleporter.py file. So we're going to search for the entity that has the player, or for the first entity that has a player on it. Then we'll come in, we'll go ahead and we'll just set the player X and player Y to that. One more thing. Actually, these right here need to become numbers. They're currently strings because they came from a file. So we'll come in here, we'll do int. Yeah, so we converted these two to integers like so. Actually, the last thing is we need to go to objects, and inside of here, we need to take 2 more arguments. So we're going to say 4, and we're going to say 5. Cool. Let's go ahead and let's add these to our maps so that when we go to somewhere map, let's see where the other teleporter is. So it's at 7 and 7. Let's go to 7 and 5, so a little bit up from where it is. And then when we come back, where is this teleporter? So so it's 0 and 0. So this one, we're going to say 0 and 2. We'll go like a little bit ahead of it. Basically, it's like nearby the teleporter for the other one, and you can set these to whatever you want. Let's go into main.py, and we'll test it, and we'll run it. Hopefully everything works here. And there we go. Look at that. Now the player's, yep. And the player kind of ended up a little bit close to where the teleporter is. And we'll just test it again. Yeah, we can like walk around this area, and we'll come back and we'll do that. very last thing that I have for you for this video is we actually have several different kinds of teleporters. So there's a left, right, up, and down teleporters. So if you jump into your, let's see, objects, you can come in here and just make different factories for each kind of teleporter. So we can actually do one for left, down, and right. And then this one, for example, that's I'll make some slight modifications to the map. So the start map, maybe we'll have the path go up here. I think we really need a level editor for this. I think in another video we'll create a level editor. This is at column 12, so 11. So we'll put this at 11 and 0. And then the somewhere map is probably good, but we're going to change this one to be 11 and 2. Let's see if this is the correct one. So we'll come into main and we'll run this. Should have the teleporter now there. So we'll run into it. And there we go. We're like in a different area. Let's come back. This needs to be the other one, but we'll change that. Perfect. Last thing we're going to do. So we'll just change this one over. So we'll come to somewhere. And let's look at our, let's see here, in our objects, what's the down one? The down one is, let's change these numbers, 5, 6, the down one's the 5th one. So we'll come in here and we'll do somewhere map. We'll change this to 5. So 3, 4, 5, and 6, they're all teleporters. They're just in, they just have different sprites. We'll run it. And let's go ahead and do this. Yeah, and there we go. And now it's a down arrow. Let's test it. Yeah, and we're back here. So I hope that you found this video useful. Thank you for sticking with me on everything. Again, the code is in the description below if you want to just take a look at it. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.